The fault line between Washington and Tehran, that is glowing red. A high-stakes White House summit between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. A warning from Tehran that its missiles are non-negotiable, and a surge of American warplanes, carriers and Patriot systems flowing into the Gulf. Diplomacy is alive but is barely breathing. Behind closed doors, Donald Trump insisting that talks must continue. Netanyahu demanding a harder line. Iran drawing a red line on its ballistic arsenal. Even as missiles are tested, drones intercepted, and an armada that is moving into position. Is this just bluster, or is this a prelude to something much bigger? We tell you and decode just that for you on the wall. Let's put out some of those graphics right here for viewers to better understand what are the flashpoints and how things stand right now. First and foremost, that summit, that emergency meeting that took place indicates that Israel is cognizant of the fact that if there are any escalations between US and Iran, retaliatory strikes will come on Israeli territory, and it will need the backing of Donald Trump and America. Second, the missile line of Iran is actually non-negotiable. Now, why is this important? It is important because there are a very large arsenal of ballistic missiles that Iran has, which Israel says is a big concern and a big barrier for any long-term security negotiations, something that Tehran says is a no-go zone, because they say only talk on uranium enrichment, but Israel and Donald Trump say unless you address the ballistic missile stockpile, it's not a deal. Third important aspect, US considers, a second carrier in Middle East. Now, this is very important, viewers, because there's already one movement of a second aircraft carrier by the US in these waters indicates the intent to scale this up further. And that intent, viewers, is extremely important. US has one of the largest bases, Qatar being one of them, which has seen heightened activity in the last couple of days. Add to it the possibility of a second aircraft carrier, and you're talking about combat readiness of America, indicating this could actually blow red any moment. 110 plus US C-17 deployments in the Gulf. As I said, the messaging here is important. US Patriot systems have actually gone mobile in Qatar. This is the next important aspect. The US Patriot systems in Qatar, where they are now on combat readiness, indicating that they are willing to now take this a notch higher if things go not as planned. Lastly, now, Oman talks are a good start, but they're just that. They are just a good start. They are indirect form of diplomacy. Both sides don't have any formal bilateral relations since 1979. Which way it will go, what will be the diplomacy here is the big key question. Now, here's the picture tonight. Diplomacy inching forward in Oman, pressure mounting in Washington, red lines hardening in Tehran, and Israel warning that it may act alone if it feels cornered. The stakes are very high. Iran's nuclear future, its missile arsenal, and the possibility that one miscalculation could ignite the Gulf. Now, to understand how we really got here and what happens if these talks collapse, this report tells you.
The doors closed quietly at the White House, but the message echoed loudly across the region. US President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met for nearly 3 hours. There were no cameras and no grand declaration. There was just one clear signal. Negotiations with Iran will continue for now. Trump says a deal is his preference, but he's also warned if diplomacy fails, America will do something very tough.
We have a massive flotilla right now going over to Iran. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal. I think they'd be foolish if they didn't.
Tehran is listening and digging in. On the 47th anniversary of Iran's Islamic Revolution, President Masoud Pezeshkian told crowds his country will not yield to excessive demands. Iran says it's ready to talk nuclear limits, even verification. But its ballistic missiles are off the table. For Washington and Jerusalem, that's the sticking point. Behind the scenes, military chess pieces are moving. More than 110 US Air Force C-17 transport aircraft have surged towards the Middle East and Europe since mid-January, capable of hauling tanks, missile systems and troops. Satellite images show Patriot missile batteries mounted on mobile launchers in Qatar. Recently, a US fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone near a carrier in the Arabian Sea. And President Trump says he's considering sending a second aircraft carrier strike group to the Gulf. Iran, meanwhile, has tested ballistic missiles and warned that any strike on its soil would bring retaliation, potentially targeting US bases across the region. And Israel is watching closely. Israeli intelligence fears Iran could rapidly rebuild its missile stockpile after last year's 12-day war. Officials warn Tehran could field thousands of missiles within weeks. At the same time, fragile talks mediated by Oman are described as a good start, but far from breakthrough.
במשא ומתן עם איראן.
This is diplomacy under a ticking clock. An NDTV Bureau report.
Now, to talk more on this, Adele Nazarian, who's a senior fellow at Gold Institute for International Study, joins me from Washington, D.C. Adele, thanks much for speaking to me on Faultlines. Let me start by asking, what do you make of these growing tensions between the U.S. and Iran? Do you think that there is a real possibility of a military escalation and a possible assault by America on Iran?
You know, great to be on with you. It's really very interesting to see what's been happening in terms of U.S. allies on the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. The statements that they have made supporting the government in Iran. Of course, every country has to defend its financial benefits, of course. But regarding the escalations in terms of military, I do believe, frankly, that the United States will be carrying out some kind of military action in the coming days, weeks, months ahead. I've said this repeatedly, and I really do think that actions speak louder than words. And President Trump has always been a man who has stuck by his words, and he's a man who does what he says and says what he does. So I do believe that increased rhetoric is one thing, but I guess the government in Iran shouldn't take the lack of action thus far as a signal that something is not coming.
Okay. So when you say something is possibly coming, what could that be? Could it be like one of those, the B-2 bomber strikes that took place last summer? Or could it be even more extensive than that? Because there's a message that Donald Trump is sending to Iran, and that is what is going to come forth in these military escalations that you're mentioning. What could that be?
I frankly think that it will look, I think the B-52 bombers are one thing. I think it's going to be much more extensive than that. I think the message that America is sending, as it will be sending, as it should, is that as the defender of human rights throughout the world, that 50,000 people being massacred in the streets of Tehran and Iran, just generally, is unacceptable. And I think it's really quite cute how they have people like Rick Sanchez and a Pakistani lady from London going around in Tehran and acting like there's nothing wrong in the streets of Tehran and everything is fine, everything is as usual. That's actually straight out of the playbook of the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the MEK. And you have to realize the current government is no different than the MEK and MEK vice versa. So this is what they do. They go there and they bus in or fly in or pay people to go to the streets to act like everything is fine. Okay. So I think that's the message. Human rights need to be defended and upheld throughout the world, and America has that responsibility.
Okay. Now, which brings me to ask that, if that assault actually takes place, which you think could be bigger than the B-2 bomber strikes, there will, of course, be a reaction and a retaliatory strike that will come in from Iran on Israel. Are we then looking at another round of the Iran-Israel conflict that happened last year?
I do, actually. I do think that if and when Iran is attacked, targeting the governance structure, that Israel will be a prime target, unfortunately. And I do think that it could escalate very quickly into a global conflict. As if Ukraine and Russia wasn't bad enough, this will be far worse because there are other allied nations in the Middle East as well. There's Saudi Arabia, there's the UAE, there's Qatar, there's Jordan, Oman. And so I just want to clarify, I know Bibi Netanyahu is in the US right now. Israel will be needing America's help if that happens.
Okay. Which brings me to ask you my final question, which is that indirect negotiations have been taking place between Iran and US through Oman. Not much breakthrough has happened. Do you expect, or do you have any hopes in terms of diplomacy? Do you think that has any possibility of leading to some sort of a breakthrough?
I think, and I wish Oman had been negotiating this before instead of Qatar. I think that would have been a much more formidable and smart approach many years ago. But I do think it's beyond negotiations. I think negotiations will be done. At the end of the day, I can say this. Based on my analysis and what I've been seeing, I am certain President Trump wants a nuclear deal with Iran. He wants a deal. He tore up the previous deal. He wants to make an even better one, and he will get that done. What I'm trying to understand, though, and what I hope he is also seeing, is that he can both have a new deal that is even better than the previous one negotiated by President Obama under Trita Parsi, who we know is a lobbyist for the Iranian regime. Instead, he can actually take an action that will result in a change in the current governance structure in Iran and negotiate a new deal. And I think that's the winning ticket. I think he will absolutely solidify his legacy in such a brilliant way by doing that.
Okay. All right, Adele, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much for speaking to me on Faultlines. And viewers, this brings us to the blinkers of segment on the show. Well, there are no easy answers for Donald Trump. He wants his legacy to be the American president who ended the Iranian nuclear program, not enable it. And he knows that. He's very cognizant of what really is the chessboard looking like right now. That the Iranian operation will not be anything like the Venezuela op. And the kind of military operations that are quick in and quick out, something that Donald Trump likes. But in Iran, it may actually be a long-drawn battle, and American forces in the region are not adequate to support a significant long-term military preps and a military operation in Iran. So Donald Trump's options are very limited on the table. He has some legacy-defining decisions to be taken, even as Middle East peace is on the edge.